What's up, everybody? It's your girl, Goddess Z, in the building. And it has been a minute since I've come to you guys with another podcast episode. And I have been so busy with a full ass life. And we are going to get into that in just a minute. But before we do, you know how your girl likes to do. I like to go ahead and get some business out of the way so you know where to find me. Okay. You can find me at Holistic and Spiritual AF. And I'm pretty much all over. I'm on Facebook, I'm on TikTok. Instagram, YouTube. I spend most of my time. My home away from home is going to be TikTok and YouTube. So be sure to check out the link to be able to find me in those places. But I've also been spending quite a bit of time on my blog, and I'm also on Substack. So if you like to read as well as listen, be sure to check that out because I put a lot of newsletters out there of a variety as well as poems and things like that. So you have the ability to be a free subscriber over there as well as a paid subscriber. Okay. So let's go ahead and get into it, okay? Like I said, my life has been so full and just full of purpose today and also full of joy, I have a lot of things, good things that are happening in my life right now. But this episode is actually going to be dedicated to someone who posted a comment on one of my TikTok videos when I was talking about the things that I had gone through and the lessons that I learned in 2023. And if you missed that episode, be sure to check that out as well. But one of the things I talked about was shadow work, and I talked about a tremendous amount of healing that was experienced as a result of that. And I was talking about healing the inner child, and I was talking about not needing validation from other people. And this had, gone on after years and years of healing and peeling back layers of the onion. It was not an overnight process because, as most of you know, I came from a lot of trauma. So there was a lot of pain, a lot of trauma, a lot of stuff that was stored inside of my DNA from my lineage. So it wasn't exactly an easy journey, but I was very persistent and I was very focused. And I also knew on an internal level, my spirit knew, based on the spirit that I am returned, that I was going to get to the other side of this. If I could make it through those things and persevere and be able to heal through those things, I would make it to the other side, to where I am now, where life is just absolutely amazing. But it did not start out that way, and I actually probably write about that more on Substack, more in detail as far as like actual experiences and stuff that I went through. I kind of talk about it briefly and gloss over it here on the podcast. I also left out the fact that you guys can follow me on the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts is no more, but YouTube Podcast is, as well as a variety of other places. So just Google me, Holistic and Spiritual AF. All right. So I want to get into it because, like I said, I was talking about this shadow work and I had somebody who came to me and said, "Hey, how did you do that?" And that's a very valid question because, I can get to talking about so much stuff and I've been in this game now for for 2 decades, like my entire adult life. I've been on this healing journey. So there's a lot of stuff that happened in between there in order for me to get to this place. So if I just kind of talk about it as a blanket statement, it seems like a person doesn't know where to start. All they know is that they don't like where they are and they want to be somewhere else. They want to be somewhere where there's less pain. Okay. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to actually be talking about 5 stages of shadow work. And we're also going to be talking about some ways that you can start to implement shadow work in your healing path and journey. If you appreciate and enjoy this, then I will also have a link down to a free shadow work guide, how to get started in shadow work. So be sure to check that out. All you have to do is put your email in and you'll have a PDF copy sent to you. So that will be in there as well. But today we're going to actually talk about it because that's what we do on podcasts. Okay. And I also wrote a blog on this too. So you, like I said, you gotta follow me on Substack or wherever it resonates with you. All right. So we were talking about, and today, just for the purposes of this podcast, we're going to talk about 5 stages of shadow work. Okay. And the first stage is going to be self-reflection and awareness. Okay. So how do we even get to that point? Like this lady that comes to me and says, "Hey, how did you do that?" Clearly, she's having some sort of awareness with inside of her spirit that says that, "Hey, this is not the way that life is supposed to be, but I don't know how to get out of it." Okay. So for me, there was intentional shadow work and then there was unintentional shadow work. There was shadow work that I knew I needed to do something. I couldn't keep living this way. I couldn't keep feeling this way. And so I would go out and seek different ways of healing. Okay. Most people know that started for me with meditation first. Meditation was the very first thing I got into about 20 years ago. And then I kind of like jumped head first into it because I'm just naturally a seeker like that. So, first thing was meditation, second thing was crystals, and boom, like third thing was metaphysics. Okay. So, I wanted to explore as deep as I could because that meditation, I remember that I was only able to meditate probably for about maybe 5 minutes. And that was the first time I ever did it, but it gave me so much peace and it gave me an escape, a healthy way to escape the feelings that I was going through because I was going through a tremendous amount of trauma that was starting to come up to the surface, feelings that had never been dealt with. And I was experiencing a lot of PTSD. So this meditation happened to just give me this peace, and I was chasing that kind of peace the whole entire time. I wanted to get out of the pain that I was feeling, similar to this young lady. So I got into meditation and then I experienced yoga and I was trying a little bit of everything. I was going to workshops, that led me down the path to various different, spiritual practices as well as spiritual teachings. And along the way, more and more started to be healed. But like I said, I had a whole lot of trauma. But I feel like each one of those things actually gave me the ability to be more and more aware of things that were deeper, deeper, deeper wounds. Okay. So it's like having wounds on top of wounds on top of wounds. And we end up having these behaviors, these ideas, these practices that we end up doing to just kind of cover up the way that we're feeling. And those create more. And it's kind of like a domino effect. And so now all of a sudden, you don't know which way to start. You don't know which came first, the chicken or the egg, and it can become overwhelming. So all I would say is if you are at a place where you're not comfortable with the way that you're existing in this world, if you're not comfortable with the manifestations that you're producing in your life and you feel an urge inside of you to do something different, then that would be some form of intentional shadow work that you can begin to go into. And shadow work is just nothing more but acknowledging parts of yourself that you don't necessarily express because you don't know how, or maybe you've expressed it and you've expressed it in other ways inappropriately. And it's parts of yourself that you don't understand because you have kind of blocked that away. And sometimes it's intentional and sometimes it's unintentional, like we just talked about. So, self reflection and awareness is going to be the first step that I say. First of all, you got to be aware that there's something that needs to be changed in order to change it. Okay. And this can come in all forms of things. Like for me, it was meditation. For some people, it can be journaling. Once I got deeper into that other level back in 2021, it definitely incorporated a lot of ancestral journaling. That wasn't something that I decided to, hey, let me just start journaling. It was something that my ancestors were calling me to do. And I felt compelled to do what it is that they were saying to do because I just felt like my spirit was being called somewhere and I was much more in tune at that point to be able to say, okay, I better listen. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to try to pretend I don't hear this, and let's see where this goes. And the journey just continued on even deeper and deeper. So certain practices, meditation, journaling, even just checking in with your feelings, noticing that you have certain feelings about certain things, whether that be anger, whether that be sadness, listening to your thoughts a little bit more, but not the negative ones, not the ones that speak down on yourself, but those are also thoughts too. If those thoughts pop up, then you have to kind of like say, whoa, where did that come from? Is it even applicable to this situation? Why do I feel that way about myself? And that could kind of start to begin to take you on a journey of recognizing that there's something there's something deeper that needs to be worked on and needs to be healed. So if you're somebody who is just like, well, I'm fine the way that I am, ain't nothing wrong with me, it's you, and you're not acknowledging it, and that's your best of being honest with yourself, then clearly you're not somebody who's ready to take that next step of healing and go through shadow work, which can be very challenging, if you're not ready for that. But if you are somebody, you're going to be honest with yourself when nobody else is in the room, when it's just you, your spirit guides, your higher power, great spirit, you're going to acknowledge the fact that something is off, because at this point you're functioning more with your higher self than your lower self. Your higher self, your spirit self is saying that, hey, we want to be more in alignment with who we originally came here to be. So, like I said, self-reflection and awareness is always going to be your first start. It's always going to be the first start as you continue to grow and move into other levels of healing. Okay. So let's see what else. We said meditation, journaling. If you're artistic, it could be, through art. And art comes in many forms. We talked about thoughts and we talked about our reactions to other people. The main goal really is to be aware of the different personality traits and aspects of yourself that you have been presenting to the world. That's going to start to kind of get the ball rolling. And then from there, you'll kind of intuitively know what it is that you need to do next. You could be, okay, you know what? Let me start journaling. You know what? Let me start reading self-help books. It's like your spirit begins to take you on a journey that is in alignment with the next phase of healing and development for your spiritual evolution process. Okay. So I view shadow work as that as well. I view shadow work as something that begins to remove certain parts or clear them up so that they're no longer holding me back from being my highest self and being able to move into purpose. Okay. Because some of these things, a lot of these things, um, were holding me back from my highest potential. A lot of these things I couldn't manifest into the next phase because I had this thing here that was going to be consistently blocking it no matter how much I wanted to do it. There was some inner shadow work that needed to be done. Okay, so self-reflection and awareness is going to be number one. Like I said, this is going to be continuous, as the process continues and goes deeper and deeper, you'll notice something else. You'll become aware of something else. Okay. So number two is going to be recognition and acknowledgement. Okay. We're going to begin to identify and acknowledge these parts of ourselves. Okay. So it's like if I find myself saying a lot of negative talk about, oh my God, I'm so stupid. I can't believe I did that. I'm so dumb. God, I never get it right. Or I hate my life, things like that. Then I need to acknowledge that. First, I become aware of it. And then I need to acknowledge where the hell is this coming from, like we just talked about. Now, some of those other practices may lead us into more understanding of that. Okay. But once I figure out what's going on, then I have to say, oh my God, that goes back to that third grade teacher that told me that I wasn't smart. Or, that reminds me of when I was a little girl and nobody wanted me to play with them, or that reminds me of when I was a little girl and I was poor and I went to a sleepover and I didn't have what the other kids had. Most everything can be traced back to some sort of childhood trauma, whether it was intentional, whether it was small, whether it was major. It usually goes back there because those first 7 years of our life are the foundational experiences of this spirit return. Come back to this life. Everything that we are experiencing, learning, hearing, seeing, being taught, is all going to affect us from that moment forward. Okay. So even if you go on and you do pretty good for yourself, you may still be someone who hates your life. You may be someone who still thinks you're inadequate. And then as a result, you become a perfectionist, or maybe you give up and say, what's the point at all? All of these things affect who we are today. So that acknowledgement and recognition is going to be very important. And also things about ourselves where, say, for instance, they don't have to necessarily be so major like that. They can be little minor things. Why am I so selfish? Why is it that I feel like I got to have everything to myself? Why is it that I get so mad? Your anger could be being misconstrued for passion. Your passion could be misplaced and misused. Once you start to tap into these things, you begin to learn more about yourself as you truly are, not as you have presented yourself to the world up until a certain point. And so you start to have some awareness, and then you start to recognize, oh gosh, that's where that came from. And some of those characteristics and traits may not necessarily be a negative thing. They may have just been used improperly up until this point. So shadow work is going to help you to be able to see what things need to just completely not be dealt with. Like, you shouldn't be doing that. And some stuff is like, okay, you have been misusing that. You could take that passion and put it into a business and then begin to excel that way. Okay. So there's different different ways of learning about yourself and learning how maybe some of those traits and characteristics have been holding you back instead of actually benefiting you. So recognition and acknowledgement is going to be number two. And like I said, this can be things like jealousy, anger, fear. Even shame, recognizing that these traits exist within inside of you without having the shame. See, this is not about guilt tripping yourself, beating yourself up for not knowing what you didn't know, but it's about acknowledging, recognizing, and being able to move forward to get to the other side so you can start to get to the healing of the deeper aspects of this. Okay. So, number one was self reflection and awareness. Number two is recognition and acknowledgement. And number three is going to be understanding and compassion. And this to me was where being able to heal that little inner child came in, because I was always so hard on myself. I was always my worst critic, and I always, expected excellent things for myself. Now part of that is just being an Aries and being who I am, as a spirit return, being a natural born leader. I expect certain things a certain way, but some of that was imbalanced and misplaced, because of some of the things that I went through as a child. Hearing things like you're not good enough, hearing things like you're never going to amount to nothing. That can take you to a extreme of I got to be perfect, I got to be perfect. Which no one can be perfect. The whole point of the life is to learn lessons so that we can transform and transcend in this lifetime. And the spirit is having a human experience to learn lessons. Okay, so nobody's going to be perfect, but being able to acknowledge the fact that I have some, things that I need to work on, and being able to do that in an understanding and compassionate way, recognizing that some of the things that I experienced and I went through as a child was not my fault. Also recognizing that, I was helpless in that situation, recognizing that I did nothing wrong. When I got to that inner child part, and that just kind of came up for me. That wasn't something that I was actually trying to do. I had heard people talking about that. I understood what that meant, but I never had any experience with that until the time was right. And that just kind of came up for me when I thought about the type of kid that I was. I was a very inquisitive kid. I was always asking questions. I had a big personality. I was artistic and creative. I was very connected to my ancestors in the spirit realm. And nobody was really paying attention to this like wonderful, amazing little kid. I was just kind of lost in the cracks. And, I went on to be able to survive and be extremely independent as a result of that. And so I was able to go back to that little child and be like, wow, you're an amazing, smart little kid. You have a lot of amazing things going on for you. There was times I thought that I wasn't pretty, for a variety of different reasons, and I was able to talk to that little child about things like that and to go ahead and to start to right those, correct those wrongs for that little inner child, that little wounded spirit inside of me, and I was able to do it in an understanding manner from a mature adult perspective, but a compassionate manner for what a 7-year-old child would have needed, and that wasn't something that I just knew to do. That was something that when the time was right and after a certain amount of healing, I was able to get to that place. And so therefore, those certain types of experiences, that sometimes those memories that may come up from the past, they no longer take control of me. They no longer paralyze me and cripple me and leave me stuck in a state of time that doesn't exist anymore, and now I'm able to move forward and move past that. But like I said in the beginning, it took some time to get to that. And it took to even begin the journey of self awareness, recognizing these things were there, consistently working on ways to heal past that through different types of practices and spiritual understandings. And then finally, something was like, okay, you're ready. It's time to stop carrying around this burden of these things that happened to you as a little child that were outside of your control. So understanding and compassion is number three. And it's also going to help me to have more understanding and compassion for whatever those adults must have went through as a child. Clearly, something happened to them to kind of shape their reality as well. And what they were doing literally was the best that they knew how to do. All they were doing is what they were taught, or all they were doing was acting out based on their experience. And we've already talked about before, like the older generation didn't have a whole lot of therapy going around. That just wasn't something that was talked about. So they had a lot of stored trauma inside of them that never had the ability to have a healthy outlet. We're talking about that as a society more than ever now, and we're talking about other forms of healing other than medicinal and pharmaceutical ways of healing. Okay. So I'm able to have more compassion about the family dynamics, and I'm able to have compassion for that little child and understanding. And now once again, that's major. I don't have to walk around with resentments and anger towards people, and you did this to me and you hurt me and that never should have happened. I was able to work on those things through shadow work by myself, and be able to make it to the other side. All right. So number 4 is going to be integration. Okay. This one right here may be a little complex. If you haven't experienced 1, 2, and 3, you're like, integration, what the heck are we talking about? And integration, we talked about it briefly just a minute ago, is where you start to intertwine and integrate certain parts of that shadow self that has been misused. Like I talked about being a perfectionist and always having to be excellent. And if I get something slightly wrong, then, oh my God, it's like, let's knock the whole thing down. It's a mess. Let's start over. Let's not do it at all. And really what it is there's a certain amount of passion there that needs to be there, but it only needs to be there at certain times. And so you start to learn how to integrate and weave in certain aspects of your personality, shadow work into your personality, your shadow self. Let's say, for instance, maybe you were somebody who was angry all the time, just about every damn thing. You don't need to be angry about everything, but sometimes you do need to get angry. You need to mean business. You need to learn how to be assertive, not aggressive. And so you start to work these qualities in a healthy manner and know when is the proper time to release that emotion. Okay, so that's what integration means. And sometimes that's also working with energy healing, which I've talked about a lot, which is one of my favorite modalities of healing. That's the modality that I practice and I help most people with, and I love it because energy healing, I describe it as is non-invasive. Okay, it's somebody getting some energy work done to them, and whatever is necessary for that individual begins to shift and tweak. And it's whatever that person is ready to handle at that time. So, energy work is, if you're trying to figure out how to balance this and you don't know how to do it yourself, let's say, for instance, you don't know Reiki, and you go to an energy healing practitioner, they can begin to balance some certain things out that can assist you on your shadow work journey that allows you to continue to move forward and continue the process of the shadow work. Okay. Now, throughout this whole process, there's going to be lots of stuff that's coming up. There's going to be things more and more that comes up. But when you're ready, and some of it may be painful to feel those things, and then some of them you may realize, I don't feel that same pain that I used to feel. I actually have great understanding, and that gives me peace, that understanding and that compassion. So integration is very, very good because it helps you to be able to basically just balance the energies properly, as well as get rid of things that just absolutely didn't serve you in the first place. So, number 5, we are here to transformation and growth. Okay. And what a journey that's been. Now, keep in mind that that can be years, it can be months, it can be weeks, it can be different levels of time depending on what it is that you're working on and what shadow work is being done at that time. Okay. But eventually you get to the other side of things. And now you've had an integration of all 5 of these. Okay. You have the self awareness, you have a knowledge of who you are. You know what I'm saying? You have a knowledge of what it is that you've experienced. You have recognition and acknowledgement about where this came from, the origin of some of these feelings and characteristics and traits like jealousy, anger, fear, and shame. And then you also have understanding and compassion. Now you've moved to some sort of place of forgiveness for yourself as well as other people, and you don't have to carry around that baggage of trauma and shame and hurt and guilt with you anymore, nor do you have to run around being angry at the damn world either. Now you've learned to integrate. And step 4, you're integrating and being able to right size those different abilities that you have. And so you're showing up as a full, individual, as a full human in the world, not subduing parts of yourself, but learning when is the appropriate time to utilize some of those gifts and energies. And then you get to transformation and growth, and transformation is a combination of all of these different things, okay? You use the insights that you've learned from all of this and you begin to embrace it. And now it's a part of you, but it doesn't consume you and it doesn't own you. And from there, you're able to grow. And where do we go? To whatever the next step of shadow work is, the healing never stops and it always continues, and you end up growing and gaining more understanding, more clarity, more awareness, and you also began to heal the people that are around you, whether you're into healing work or not. If a person knows that you've come from a dark past and they see that you're able to find some peace, understanding, compassion, transformation in you, people kind of want to know, what the heck did you do? Like, I want some of that too, or even just want to be around you because you exude this total opposite energy, and that is kind of a breakdown of the five steps of shadow work, and like I said, it could take days, it could take months, it could take years, it could take whatever it takes for the individual, but it's so worth it, And a lot of people, if they try to force this thing too soon, then they're going to give up, because it's going to be too painful. It's going to be too much, You're going to be bringing up unspoken of taboo topics, and family hurts and traumas, And if you're the only one doing this, sometimes it can be even harder. So I would definitely urge and encourage you along your journey to be able to find some like-minded individuals of people who are also doing this, who have done this, who are understanding, who can give you tips and help you along the way. I would definitely say tap into your ancestors and your spirit guides. I'm always about that because they're definitely going to assist you and help to keep you safe so that you don't find yourself doing too much too fast. But if you are doing this properly and if it is intentional shadow work, then you can't do it wrong. You just have to go slowly. Don't try to do too much. And I talked about briefly unintentional shadow work. And unintentional shadow work is what I describe as when you didn't think there was anything wrong with that pattern, or you seem to be just fine, but you have healed so much that now you're elevating to new levels of vibration. And it's like, okay, this doesn't fit. You're going to have to shift this so that this is in alignment with where it is that you're trying to go and grow. And so some things may be brought up as you're able to handle it. That's like, okay, you need to check that, And if you've got some experience with shadow work, which hopefully you do by that point, then you know what time it is. It's like, oh man, we got to go on this shadow work journey. But you know what? It's so worth it when you get on the other side, And so for me, my shadow work journey has been a long time. I consider it, a conscious shadow work journey for my entire adult life. And I went through some things before that, way before I even knew anything about any kind of healing journey. And I didn't know how I was going to get out of the pain and the feelings. And so I'm so grateful to my ancestors and my spirit guides for, somehow getting me over to some meditation, and that was the beginning for me. And it's been going and going, and I never gave up, and I continued to seek, and I continued to heal, and I continued to grow through the pain. And now I'm to a place of transformation and growth. And that doesn't mean that there's not other stuff in there. It just means that the stuff that's in there isn't as crippling and damaging and damning as it used to seem. So hopefully you guys got something out of that. That is it for this podcast episode. Once again, like I said, I'm going to have the workbook, the PDF that's going to be down inside of the description. So be sure to check that out. That is free to you guys. We're going to go over everything that we just talked about in a little bit more detail. And I'm also going to share a little bit about my story. So be sure to keep following me. And that is it until the next episode, guys. Peace.